Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Michael.
And this is the second three-person audio. Sorry, my dog just topped down here and distracted me.
Hi, Indy. It's a four-person audio now.
Yeah. This is the second episode that we're doing with all three of us on the podcast. It's cool of us to be able to all come together.
I think it's our third three-person audio.
Technically, yeah.
What was the other one we did? We did the draft?
Yeah. Wait, no, maybe I'm mistaking it. Yeah, okay. It's our second.
We got a really cool episode today, and the movie we're doing is Laputa, Castle in the Sky, or Western audiences might know this as just Castle in the Sky from 1986. It's a Studio Ghibli film.
Oh, wait, this is our third one, because we did... We did the draft episode, then we did the year-end visit episode, and now here we are.
Episode.
Right.
All right.
Not crazy.
All right, and I have one other thing to say before we actually talk about this movie. Jason, you and I did Death Trap together, and we both really loved it. And if you haven't heard that episode yet, or have not even heard of that movie, you should go check it out and check our previous episodes out. And I liked it so much that I bought the Blu-ray of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Blake is holding up a Blu-ray of Death Trap, and he looks very proud of himself. I
am very proud of myself because it's sadly one of our least listened to episodes, even though it's like one of the coolest, like most underrated films that we've done on this podcast. And so I was kind of like thinking to myself last week, I was like, if I don't buy this and just give this away to people to watch, nobody's going to freaking watch this movie. And that's a shame. So
yeah, it's hard to find as well, so that's a good move.
Yeah, exactly. So Mike's going to be the first victim of my Blu-ray.
Oh, no.
All right. Well, without further ado, we should probably circle back to this week's actual movie, Castle in the Sky. And Jason, do you want to start with the plot?
Yeah, sounds good. So Castle in the Sky is a classic masterpiece of an anime film directed by Hayao Miyazaki of Studio Ghibli, and we're following the thrilling journey of Shida and Pazu as they set out to discover the secrets of the mythical floating castle Laputa. Along the way, they encounter both allies and enemies, including pirates and government agents who are also in search of Laputa. With a mix of action, humor, and heartwarming moments, Castle in the Sky is an exciting tale of friendship, courage, and wonder.
Hey, that was pretty good.
It was great, and you know what? The only thing that I want to really expand on with that is that this movie is like one of the coolest steampunk films I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how did they do it in 1986? I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a really cool animation style. It's a pioneer in that regard. And we're going to talk about kind of how this fits into, or where this fits into the Studio Ghibli filmography in that sense. But there's some also really cool historical aspects. And this film has a really interesting and exciting legacy that I'm really excited about to talk about when we get into the second part of our episode.
This was the second Studio Ghibli film, or I believe... like the first one when they were actually Studio Ghibli, but it's the second that Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah. We'll talk about all of that when we get into the sequels, prequels, and remakes, I think. So let's talk characters and people you may know. And because this is an animation, this is all voice work. There's some really cool voice work in here, especially if you're listening to the English dub. And to prime us for even the characters of people you may know discussion, I do have to kind of note that there's essentially three versions of this film floating around.
That's right.
So basically, we have the original 1986 Japanese version. Following that, in 1989, there's an English dub that's probably fairly difficult to find now because it was not highly regarded. The audio dub was kind of awkward, apparently. And then Disney actually redubbed this in 1998, I believe, and then was released in 2003. In this episode, I'm going to mostly focus on the English dub, just because in terms of people you may know, that's where you're going to know people from. But there is one interesting Japanese connection here to massive anime, so I'm going to bring up all of them as well quickly.
Cool. I have a question though. Which version did we all watch? I watched the original.
Fancy.
I watched the English dub on
Oh.
Netflix.
I also watched the English dub on Netflix.
That means a few things are going to be different that we'll be able to talk about probably. That's fun.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited to talk about that. I've got that shelved for actually the sound and score. Sorry. I've actually got that set for the sound and score part of our podcast in part 2.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
So, Pazu, is that how you say it right?
Pazoo!
So, Pazu in the Japanese original is played by Mayumi Tanaka, this is the Japanese person that you might actually have heard her voice before, because she actually voices Monkey D. Luffy in One Piece, one of the biggest anime shows of all time.
Really? Like currently?
Currently, yeah. It's been on for like 20 some odd years, I believe.
Yeah.
And she's been voicing the character for, I think, over 800 episodes now, which is wild.
So would that be the main character of One Piece for those who don't know?
It is the main character of One Piece.
Do you know that apparently Jamie Lee Curtis is a huge One Piece fan?
I did not know that.
Well, there you go.
Damn it, Jamie Lee Curtis just keeps getting cooler and cooler every time I hear about her.
Yeah, really.
And so the English counterpart for Pazu is James Vanderbeek, most notably from Dawson's Creek and the meme from Dawson's Creek with him crying.
Oh, yeah. The blonde guy, right?
Yeah, the blonde guy. I thought you might know that. He also was one of the stars of CSI Cyber. Never seen any of the CSI shows, so sorry if I offend anybody.
Yeah, I don't know who this is.
Shida is our next character, and Shida is played by Kyoko Yuz. Oh, maybe I should talk about Pazu, actually. I haven't talked about Pazu at all. So, circling back to Pazu really quickly, he's the hero of the story, I would say.
Well, like the male lead.
Yeah, he's the male lead, and he's the kind of happy-go-lucky. He almost reminded me of Mario, if anybody else kind of saw that as well.
Maybe it's the overall.
And he had a really tough head.
Yeah.
Like a hard-headed guy.
Yeah. He comes from this little industrial town. He's appears to be kind of an orphan living in his own home, working in the mines, very in this steampunk-esque world.
Almost indestructible. He can go through brick walls with no problem.
As we learn very quickly in the film.
Yeah. I was just going to say, he's very charming. Like, he's happy-go-lucky. Imagine if Luke Skywalker was content on the moisture farm. That's kind of how I felt with him.
Yeah. And funny enough that you bring up Star Wars, because I'm going to bring that up in probably about 2 minutes.
Oh, dude, I just set you up. I was teeing you up.
You did. You were teeing me up. So our next character is Shida, who is the girl who falls from the sky at the beginning of the film out of the almost like blimp-like steampunk vehicle that we get in the opener. We learn pretty quickly that she has a stone on her that potentially has almost magical powers, like superior technological powers is what they call it in this world.
Which is cool because it's not just like all magical, but there's like that essence to it, and they have like a strong belief in science throughout this world because they're so steampunk, and like
Right.
they've sorted out how to fly and everything with steam, which is pretty insane.
Yeah, the whole setting of this world is something we should definitely touch on. Like, I was reading about this movie, and some people consider it post-apocalyptic. But then I think there's moments when, like, they confirm that it's like the 1830s or the 1890s or something. So it's a very interesting, almost conflicting setting. Like, it's very anachronistic.
Yeah, I believe the opener, it sets itself up as in like 1896 or somewhere in that time period.
Yeah.
It's like the alternative industrial era, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Or alternative industrial revolution. So circling back to Shida. Shida is the one who's kind of on the run throughout the film that Pazu is kind of helping out. She's being tracked by everyone. Like, everybody is after her, and everybody is after her stone and what she knows about the floating castle in the sky and the legend of the floating castle in the sky. Yeah, in the Japanese original, she's played by Kyoko Yokozawa. And in the English dub, she's actually voiced by Anna Paquin, who you may know from X-Men, which is where I know her from.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
As
yeah. Rogue, right.
Yeah, that's where she's most notable from. She's also in the show Flack, the starring role in that. It's a Prime show. I haven't actually seen it or heard of it, but it's a pretty recent show. So if you've seen that, that's where she comes from. And Sheeta actually has some. There's some flashbacks for Sheeta's character, and so there's some younger versions of her, and she's voiced in those flashbacks by Debbie Derry Barry, who actually voices Jimmy Neutron in the show Jimmy Neutron.
Oh, I've
What?
seen her. I was surprised Jimmy Neutron was voiced by a woman. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's their connection to Jimmy Neutron there. I wasn't expecting that.
Was not expecting that.
Yeah. Dola, the leader of the pirates, one of the coolest characters in the movie, one of my favorite characters in the movie anyway, played by Koto Hatsu in the Japanese version. And in the dub, we have Cloris Leachman, who, if you see who she is, she actually just passed away in 2021 at the age of 94. So modern audiences kind of know her as like almost like a grandmotherly figure. And I recently watched her on the show American Gods, and we've actually talked about Cloris Leachman on this podcast as well, because
Happily.
she voiced Hogarth's teacher in The Iron Giant.
Oh, no way.
Cool. Yeah, so we have a cool connection there. We have two other characters to talk about, and they're kind of the other main people chasing after Sheeta. So there's Muska, who's kind of the secret agent. He's like the CIA operative in this movie, played by Minoru Terada, and voiced in the English dub by Mark Hamill, who is Luke Skywalker.
I really wanted to, once I found out that there was an English dub that I didn't know about when I was watching, and I saw that it was Mark Hamill, I was like, oh, I bet that's so good.
He actually received a lot of praise for his voice acting in this.
I was watching this movie with my roommate the other night, and halfway through the movie, I looked over at him and I said, "You know who that is? That's Mark Hamill." And he was like, "Shut up, no it isn't." And I pulled up my phone. I'm like, "Yep, there it is." How funny is it that Luke freaking Skywalker has this pitch perfect, raspy villain's voice? Like, yeah, it's phenomenal.
He really sells the character because, in a sense, this character is almost like an archetype borderline, but he sells the characters in his voice and the emotion and the intensity of the character.
Yeah.
And the last character chasing after Sheeta is the general of the army, played by Iricho Nagai. I'm going to apologize right now for all of the Japanese names that I've butchered at this point in time.
Yeah, and get used to it. We're not going to start pronouncing them correctly anytime soon.
Ichiro Nagai.
There we
that's
go.
pretty good.
That's pretty good. I guess. I have no idea, but good for you. Voiced by Jim Cummings, who I hadn't heard of before, but he's actually a major Disney voice actor. And
yeah.
if you've watched a Disney movie in the last 20 to 30 years, you've probably heard his voice.
Yeah, he's one of those iconic unsung heroes of voice acting.
Very much agree. Very cool filmography if you want to go check that out. And then there's two other voice actors that I want to mention here just for reasons. Uncle Palm, a character that we'll probably talk about in the spoiler part of the episode, is played by Richard Dysart in the English dub, who plays Dr. Cooper, the physician in The Thing.
Wow, another throwback to our first episode.
Fun.
Our very first episode, which I'm sure if I listened to now would sound super awkward.
Yeah.
I don't think these have stopped being awkward, but I think
True.
we've toned it down a little.
And the last person that I want to mention is Henry, one of Dola's children, is voiced by none other than the walking piece of human garbage, Andy Dick.
Yep.
I thought you were going to say
I heard
Christopher Walken.
Not as fun. I heard that voice and I was like, that's not Andy Dick, is it? Like,
Man, you've got an ear for voices, eh?
surprisingly, yeah. For a guy who's not great with music.
And then for director, we already mentioned this is a Hayao Miyazaki film, very well known as the founder of Studio Ghibli. You know, he's made a ton of Studio Ghibli films, which, should we mention them here? We probably should mention them here. You know what? Why don't I ask you guys, what Studio Ghibli films have you seen prior to this one?
Yeah, sure. So I've watched Howl's Moving Castle, and Spirited Away. I'm very glad we watched this one because I think it's so much better to like lead someone into Studio Ghibli films with this compared to the other two. Especially Spirited Away, it's a little much. But this was perfect.
Yeah, and so what I'll say about that as well is because I'm coming from a similar background as you, whereas I've seen Spirited Away, and this is my second Studio Ghibli film. Spirited Away is very much in the Japanese lore and history and culture of Japan, and so as a Western audience, if it's your first one, you're going to be a little confused about what's happening, maybe. Whereas this one, it's really original. It's a very original story. It's a very original world. And because of how important this film is to movie culture, there's a lot of films that come post this that credit this as an inspiration. And so as a Western audience, this film feels a little bit just more familiar than I would say like Spirited Away.
I would say that this is jumping ahead to my opinion a bit, but this movie almost, to me, felt like a classic Disney movie. Like, it's a very simple premise. It's a very simple story. It's a very kind of pastoral, comforting locale. Like, yeah, this movie tracks really well with Western audiences.
Yeah, I would very much agree. And at the same time, like, there's so much implicit world building within the background of this film and everything else that the more you want to pay attention, the more you want to be rewarded by paying attention to what's happening, the more you will be rewarded. Because I really fell in love with this world and wanting to live in this world and spend time in this world.
Yeah, I also want to bring up that this was based on Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. So that adds like that little bit of familiarity, I guess, with more of a Western audience. So, but they built off of those ideas in such a compelling way.
Right.
Yes.
So who's this movie for? And I guess the other part to this that I always ask...
Did you want to know what my history with Ghibli was?
Oh, sorry.
Jesus. Actually, this is my first ever Studio Ghibli movie.
Cool.
Yeah. I've always been aware of them. Like, I've always kind of known what they are and, like, the signature art style and all that stuff, but this was my first actual Ghibli movie.
And what's really interesting about that is I think out of the three of us, you've probably watched the most cartoons and or animes and potentially read the most comics.
Probably, yeah. Now that I think about it, I didn't really watch anime as a kid or a teenager, but I went through a bit of a boom in my mid-20s. It didn't last very long, but yeah,
You've watched a lot of the classics, though. Like Dragon Ball Z
yeah,
and stuff.
Dragon Ball Z, Digimon. That's about it.
And you watched like the Batman animated series and stuff like that as well, right?
Yeah, also that. So,
which has the Mark Hamill connection is kind of what I'm getting at there. So
yeah, it definitely does. So yeah, probably out of the three of us, I'm the one who should be the most well versed on Ghibli movies, but I'm not.
And that's why you're the only one saying Ghibli instead of Ghibli.
He was saying Corleone.
I was going to bring that
in
up.
The Godfather, and I had to correct him in that. So
I said Corleone today to someone. We were talking about The Godfather, and I caught myself saying it again. So
we all have our faults here for saying things wrong, unless you're Jason.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so who is this movie for, and does it hold up to a modern viewing in 2023?
Pew.
So where I want to start with this is, who is this movie for? If you're at all intrigued by the idea of a steampunk film, and a steampunk film done right, done very, very well, then this is for you. Even if you're not a huge fan of anime, there's a very cool aesthetic to this film. And the way I would describe this film, and it was kind of described like this online as well, is that it's essentially steampunk Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark for kids.
Huh. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
while I think this film is probably targeted at the like 8 to 12 age group, and I felt that in the dialogue, especially in like the first 30 minutes,
Yeah.
just with the adventure and the pace of the film, how things move, like I kind of got swept up in all of it by the end of it. Like I was really invested in what was happening and the characters and how their stories were going to
They
end.
really draw you in with the action right away, and like layering the story up as the intensity builds. There was very few lulls in the film for me, and I think like there's only a few points where like things were silent, but it was like on purpose. I loved that.
Yeah. The movie just kind of moves at a breakneck pace. Not in an obnoxious way, but
So that's what makes me think like, yes, it would be great for kids to watch this, that 8 to 12 range, because it draws them in, and but it's also great for people who might get bored with like something like Spirited Away.
Or even like Disney princess movies, right? Because this world is so unique and so fascinating that even if you're not a kid, you're going to be in awe of certain things. Like when we first lay eyes on Laputa, the castle in the sky, like the room was silent where we were watching it in. Like we were both kind of in awe of the
Oh yeah.
majesty of it.
that's a fucking castle in the sky, all right.
Yeah, 100%. The only asterisk that I'll put to like the children 8 to 12 thing is there's a lot of gun use in this film and potentially frightening sequences. You know, if you've got a kid who's really uncomfortable in those kind of films, there's also a lot of talk of death, then this might not be for you and your kids. But I know for me, as a kid, when I was 8 years old, I was gifted the Indiana Jones box set, and Mike and I watched
dude.
that together for my 8th birthday.
Yeah.
Probably brings back some memories.
Some terrible memories.
Yeah,
I
when
had
the
to go-
faces melted in Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was definitely quite a shock.
I had to call my mom and go home.
But what I'll say is, though, like, you got to read the room, right? Like, as a kid, I was ready for that, and Mike maybe wasn't as ready for that kind of thing,
Well,
right?
and maybe to speak in the movie's defense a little, like, there's not really an emphasis on combat. Like, if anything, the heroes are just running from danger the whole time.
Yeah, for sure.
I think spoiler alert, but at one point, Pazu gets like a grenade launcher. He never uses it on anyone. He just
That's
uses
true.
it to like break through obstacles.
Worm his way through very small holes head first.
Yeah, that kid has intense upper body strength. Like,
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking of in terms of comparisons for this film is if you're a kid of the 90s like us and you watched the movie Atlantis, then
oh yeah,
A, there's some inspiration there that I think we're going to talk about later, and B, you're going to probably really enjoy this film because it plays out very similarly. There's so much DNA between these two films that I would highly recommend it in that regard. The other two kind of things that I wanted to mention that I was kind of thinking of in my peripherals while I was watching this, and I was almost like, when I first thought of this, I was like, am I stereotyping this? But am I getting Final Fantasy vibes from this film?
do 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 do.
And
I was trying to do
I
the Final
was.
Fantasy. Okay.
Actually, I was getting those vibes because the Final Fantasy creators actually heavily based a lot of the steampunk and vehicles from that game series off of this film.
That makes so much
Yeah.
sense.
What surprised me the most about viewing this movie was not sometimes when you watch classics, you catch echoes of other things you like because it's just been copied or so clearly inspired other movies. What surprised me most about this movie was how many like senses of like video game deja vu I got. Like even Laputa, like the castle with all the vines and stuff. I was getting heavy like Dark Souls, Elden Ring
Yeah,
vibes. Even with like the like the doors that disappear, all that stuff. Yeah.
If you're not getting the feeling now, I think all three of us are on the same opinion that in terms of setting, this is one of the coolest settings that we've done on this podcast. Like, I really can't emphasize that enough.
Everything, even
Yeah,
just like
absolutely.
the clouds in the intro and like, yeah, just the clouds throughout, like they felt so mystical and everything. And then all of the
Ooh.
like the mine down deep in the mind. You have this certain feeling. They just knocked it out of the park with this.
You know what other thing I just thought of now that probably drew a little bit of inspiration is Jordan Peele's film Nope and the clouds and how the clouds are used to hide things.
Yeah, that's a connection.
The last thing that I was thinking of when I was thinking about this was this film has like a child, almost like Brandon Sanderson level of world building to it that I really appreciated.
Interesting.
Feels so deep and rich, and like I want to know more from the world itself. I just want to like travel with them after or something like that, and because just the way the characters and their motivations and everything, they fit into this like deeper world, and I want to see what else is going on.
I've been talking to this girl, and we were talking about animation and stuff, and she basically said that like to her, Heaven is a studio. I'm gonna say it wrong. A Studio Ghibli movie.
No, you're actually saying it right.
If Heaven exists,
it is supposed to be Ghibli.
Oh, okay. Jeez. Yeah. So for her, Heaven is a Studio Ghibli movie. And after watching this movie, I was like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like I could.
That would be very satisfying.
If I could transmit myself into a new world, I'd just be a miner somewhere.
Uncle Palm.
Yeah, I'd be that guy.
I would say that if you love synth music and like the 80s like beginning of synth music, the Japanese version is absolutely unreal, and you guys missed out hard.
Yes, we'll talk about that later. I really appreciated the music of this film and the version that I watched because it almost had like a bit of a Reeds undertone to it. Like not quite Titanic, but there was a little bit of like the same kind of instrumentals used in this. And I really love when that's incorporated into a film, and it fit the film extraordinarily well.
Yeah, I'll say more about that later, but
yeah, we'll talk about that in the spoiler section.
Like I was saying, it's almost a cliche to say this, but this movie is almost for everyone.
Yeah.
I feel like kids would really like it because you've got the child protagonists. And then adults, like we're adults and we're enjoying it because we're getting like sucked into like the aesthetic and the vibe and all that stuff.
Yeah, and the world building as well.
Yeah,
it has enough depth that adults can watch it, and it has enough like action and lighthearted and like enjoyable, heartwarming adventure. Yeah.
When to watch? I kind of like this as like a midweek movie. I think you could also make an argument for like a Sunday family gathering kind of movie with the kids and adults and everyone together.
I think it could fit well into a Saturday afternoon where you're just hungover and chilling all day, but you've already watched something else and you're like feeling a little bit better. This is what I want to watch.
As an adult, then.
Yeah, very specifically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or maybe you're hungover and you want to sit your kids down for 2 hours and let them be quiet and just let the movie pour over you. Could also be another good experience.
Who knows? We don't have kids.
No. But we do have hangovers.
Yes.
Boy, do we. I don't know. I watched this movie on a Tuesday night with my roommate, and I definitely feel like it's a night movie because it is a blockbuster, and you want that blockbuster experience.
Oh, it would have been amazing to watch this in theaters. I saw a few.
Oh yeah.
I saw a few people online say they saw just one image of this movie and they made their mom drive across like states to go see it in a theater, and it would have been unreal with like the full surround and big screen, everything.
Yeah, if Studio Ghibli ever has a movie marathon in our area, I'll pay attention to it. We'll go check it out.
Do you know that in Japan, Studio Ghibli has a museum and a theme park?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like almost Disney level size at this point.
Oh, yeah,
like,
over there.
I would compare them to Pixar.
I think the theme park just opened in like November of 2022. Yeah, it's a big deal. Apparently the museum has like never before seen like shorts too.
Nice.
Cool.
So I guess we're going to Japan, boys.
Yeah, I would love to go to Japan.
One last thing for like when to watch, or I guess who to watch, but or who should watch. This is a great great intro for Studio Ghibli overall. This, I would think I would start off based on what I've seen and read, either this for someone who's like really unsure about Studio Ghibli, this would get them hooked. But if someone's a little more into style of thing, Princess Mononoke would have been all, like, what from what I've seen is also like a great intro.
Yeah, and what I'll say on that note too is like, just now I finished this film, and I kind of immediately wanted to go and watch another Studio Ghibli film.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty invested in the whole company at this point. Where to watch? Currently, this is streaming on Netflix, and what's really cool about that is we've kind of hinted that there's different versions floating around. You can actually watch 2 of the 3 main versions of this film, the English dub and the original Japanese with subtitles. So I would highly recommend going and check it out on Netflix right now. I don't know how long it'll be up for, but check it out while it's on.
I'm so happy I didn't have to rent this off YouTube. Like, for once, I saved $5.
Yeah, this is a film that's it's been a while since we have looked at a more mainstream film, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think that's it for spoiler-free discussion. So if you haven't seen this movie and you want to go check it out, like I said, go look at it at Netflix, and then come back in a week and listen to the spoiler-full discussion where we dive deep into this film and the making of it and our favorite plot points and quotes.
See you next week, everybody.
Not even a good podcaster could ruin this episode.
That's from the last one.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Take the movie, Michael. That was not from Death Trap.
Nani?